Welcome to Studio Chat, an entertainment talk show covering movies, TV, music, and more. Chelsea here with a special guest, a renowned conductor, producer, and educator whose work you've definitely heard in film, TV, video games, and with orchestras worldwide. Angel Velez, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to speak with you all about your fascinating career so far. And first and foremost, you have a very special event this week, Silent Films Live 4 at Warner Brothers Studios. This is a series that not only entertains the silent film fans of LA, but also benefits the organization Education Through Music Los Angeles. So since this is at the forefront for you this week, let's start things off by talking about this event and how the Silent Films Live series first began.
Sure. So I'm very lucky to, first of all, to be a benefactor of wonderful music education programs. But I didn't grow up in California. I grew up in the Midwest, and I can only imagine if I had a program like ETMLA back there, a program that serves over 18,000 underprivileged students in the LA metro area. And I'm a member of their associates board. And there are quite a few composers on the various boards of ETMLA. And many, many years ago, almost about a decade ago, like any board, we're asked to either write a check as our support or to do a fundraiser. And I thought, let's do a fundraiser, make this fun. And let me tell you, it would be much easier and less expensive to write a check every single time. But it's a lot of fun. It brings a lot of money to the organization. So I'm happy to do it. So Silent Films Live started off well, as a way to do a concert without having to pay fees to do any kind of movie that is owned by someone else. So these are all in public domain, and so we can use them, and then we put new music to them. And so to keep it relevant to not just the our audience of ETMLA, but to keep it relevant to general audiences now, we have them all. These are roughly 10-minute clips that have been rescored by well-known Hollywood film and TV game composers. Everyone from William Ross, who's perhaps best known for music for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. He wrote Harry Potter 2 with John Williams, to Laura Cartman, who wrote Miss Marvel. To this concert coming up, we have Blake Neely, who's written for music for the TV show The Flash. Sherry Chung, who's written for Riverdale and Batwoman and Gremlins, and just a wonderful list of people that it hopefully connects these two different generations, an older generation, kind of an older time of Hollywood, and a generation now that watches things like, animated series and Netflix and everything else. So we put it all together and we rescored about 10-minute clips, at least for this coming up show, for 7 different films, including the ending of The Freshman, which was done by the famous actor Harold Lloyd. And this is the centennial of The Freshman. So we're excited to do the big ending scene, the 15 minutes of chaos of him at the Coliseum with the actual USC football team then. So a really amazing actor to take those real hits. So excited to do all of that at the iconic Clint Eastwood scoring stage at the beautiful Warner Brothers Studios.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing all that with us. It's definitely very exciting. I love that idea of bridging the gap between generations. What's one of the good things about the modern world is that we do have a lot of access to these silent films, and especially with them being public domain now, a lot of younger generations are finding these films and discovering silent comedy and also silent drama for the first time and realizing what an amazing art form this really is. So that I think that's a great innovative way of pairing it all up together.
Oh, it only looks that way in retrospect. There was no grand master plan. I can't think of it in any way. When I was working on the program a little while ago and sending it to our 2 wonderful hosts, Steve Gaynor, ASC, American Society of Cinematographers. He's a museum curator, a well-known cinematographer, as well as Suzanne Lloyd, the granddaughter of Harold Lloyd. I was messaging them, and the second half of the program is going to focus on the big three. The big three, referencing the big 3 silent film comedic actors of Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, and Buster Keaton. So only because in looking at that, I realized, oh my gosh, we have the big 3. So it kind of makes for a nice narrative later on that people can sell. But believe me, it's all by coincidence.
Well, it works out nicely nonetheless. And definitely, I mean, Silent Films Live ties right in with your connection with the legacy of the iconic Harold Lloyd, as you mentioned, and his granddaughter Suzanne Lloyd as well. You did a 100th anniversary celebration of Safety Last in 2023 and are now the music director for all things Harold Lloyd. So, as personally a longtime admirer of Harold Lloyd's works, I would love to learn more about how you first became involved in the Harold Lloyd world and also what are some of your favorite Harold films?
Oh my gosh. It's a love-hate relationship because in my world of post-production concert side, it's it's wonderful that people get to say they kind of have this consumer experience of appreciating all the things that go into it. I mean, I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for Harold Lloyd to create all these incredible different stunts and great storylines and give it the appearance of seeming so easy and effortless. And the audience is like, more, more, more. And at some point, you're like, my back hurts. Or, he famously hurt his hand. But in Harold Lloyd, my gosh, there's so many great scores, either by Carl Davis or by Robert Israel, that I can't blink for about 75 minutes because there's
Wow.
so much happening. And I know that sounds silly, but I mean, really, it becomes like you cannot space out. You're on that second cup of coffee without a doubt because you're listening to either, we're doing this all live, and hopefully I have a click track, which are headphones and a metronome that is going to my head doing this the whole time. And so we have predetermined, my team and I, to make sure everything is mechanically synced exactly where it's supposed to be. If Harold falls down, we don't want that to not be there. That drum hits whatever it is, that kind of takes the magic away from it. So to make sure all that is synchronous, either the film is entirely memorized, which is really difficult, or we have as many people synchronized with click tracks like that. I came in about with it I think in silent films too, and it's really odd to say that there's a different category of each one, and this is number four. But a wonderful composer by the name of Nathan Barr has an incredible studio in the Valley called Banderica, and we had done silent films too there. And the reason we had done it there because in gosh, maybe about 10 or so years ago, he had rescued the original Fox Studios Wurlitzer organ. And the Wurlitzer organ is an iconic organ that plays essentially everything. And that's what most silent films had. They had this Wurlitzer being the company organ and became famous because it has so many options. You could literally create bells and whistles and trigger all kinds of unique sound effects. But he restored the actual organ that was used in Home Alone, used in Patton, used in The Sound of Music, and he restored it and put it in his studio. And one of the guests there he introduced me to was Suzanne Lloyd. And Sue and I chatted and discussed things more and more, and eventually came about the idea of let's do something a little bigger. And then the pandemic happened. So the idea of doing something celebrating Harold Lloyd on a bigger scale was always kind of a conversation. My world being more of the concert orchestral world, the studio recording world. And then it came about the time, thanks to the wonderful support of the um, Academy Museum. They wanted to do a centennial of the iconic Safety Last. And I don't know how, but there's actually a photographer there for the event. And he later on sent me some proofs he had taken. And there, sure enough, is this massive screen. And he somehow caught my hands in my white tuxedo. My arms are up, very Instagram worthy. But there's Harold Lloyd hanging from the clock, that iconic clock moment that people would immediately identify between his round spectacles and that clock dangling moment. It's been a really fun process to be a part of, the Harold Lloyd estate and to work with Suzanne Lloyd. And like I said, it is mostly a love relationship, but when it comes down to actually doing it to not let an audience down, that part becomes a little more stressful.
Definitely. There's a little bit of tension. I mean, there's a lot of tension in the Harold films with these daring stunts that he performs, and definitely silent movie music is such that it needs to be, right on point with it and hit with those actions and everything. It's not even just
And it's
implied, it's
silent.
very literal.
It's always music the entire
Yeah.
time. I mean, we do in a modern film nowadays, there might be like 20 to 50 minutes of music in a 2 hour film, which is if we did that live, oh my gosh, that's so much easier. Let's, do Marvel films live. We can rest and breathe for 10 minutes. But silent film, no, the music carries it the whole time with all the great action happening on the screen.
Absolutely. No, it's a crazy time, just like watching a Harold film or a Buster or a Charlie Chaplin film, anything in that, silent comedy genre definitely gets very hectic and chaotic, and I can imagine the music definitely matches live. So that's a fun but challenging undertaking, I'm sure.
So
Definitely. Well, personally, I've always been a very long time fan of Harold Lloyd, so I'm always happy whenever I see any kind of public appreciation for Harold Lloyd's masterpieces, because especially the fact that it seems like a lot of go-to names that people are familiar with when it comes to silent films. The first that might come to their mind might be Charlie Chaplin, and then maybe Buster Keaton after that. Harold, even though at the time he was very well, well reputed and well recognized, I feel like nowadays he's not necessarily the first household name that people refer to with silent films. So I love that there are events dedicated to kind of getting his works out there and making sure people recognize and remember him as well.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I have this conversation with my son who's 10, and it's a whole new generation that is they have so many tools to create at their disposal from a phone, an iPad, whatever it is. They create their own little movies. They're essentially recreating 100 years later all these little, not silent movies, but the same kind of creative ideas of how can I create something. You have a decent quality phone with you, and you can do a lot. So it's pretty cool that people are coming about this, some from a historical aspect, but some are just genuinely finding it and exploring it and falling in love with it for all the right reasons.
Definitely. I'd also like to talk a little bit more about the music of Robert Israel, which is part of Silent Films Live as well, because I've always felt that he perfectly and beautifully captured not only everything Harold, but everything of that time period, the tones, melodies, instrumentations, all the choices he makes in composing really feels so authentic to the time that you never think it was written in any other era but that of the original films. And that's something I've always admired about him as a composer. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as a conductor and interpreting his music in particular into the live performance.
Oh man, so that's not fair at all because we just have to go through all of Bob Israel's music and just make sure that it was exactly synchronized and it's so many notes. And so I will skip ahead to my personal trauma of like, okay, we can do this. And because you're right, it's absolutely fantastically written, but there's so many nuances, so many details out there that he captures. It's wonderful. But if you're the one that has to create that, if I dare say masterpiece, it's incredibly detailed. So, I mean, yeah, Bob Israel's music is fantastic. Bob actually lives out, from my understanding, in the Czech Republic from the US. And we find out that we have a strange connection because years ago I did a concert in the Czech Republic in this little area called Olomouc. And they have a wonderful orchestra called the Moravian Philharmonic. And I guest conducted them many, many years ago. And as Bob and I were chatting over the last few months, he mentioned that he's in that area and he has a recording of the freshman with that orchestra, which is kind of, a cool little thing. But he is a really fantastic composer who I can't sing enough of his praises. And of all the composers who have done these things, but I mean, just the level of detail that he creates in there is really cool. There's one moment where there is this nonstop action music, and it leads up to a whistle in the actual football game, and that whistle is played by the orchestra, and it cannot be late, it cannot be early, it has to be perfect. So Bob Israel has done a fantastic job of, if I do my job, that it will make it seem completely natural and completely seamless. So, I mean, just, I can't say enough things. What a phenomenal composer. I know that between Robert Israel's music and Carl Davis's music, those two, heavyweight composers have done a tremendous amount for silent film, but especially for Harold Lloyd and his incredible films.
And I love that you also brought up the topic of you're traveling the world as well. I mean, I love that you bring Hollywood with you wherever you go, whether it's Czech Republic or Singapore, Hungary, Costa Rica. You're heading to Japan soon, for example. And I'm sure it's difficult to narrow down, but in your experiences traveling the world, what do you feel have been a couple of standout moments for you, things that really impacted and left an impression on you?
I I don't know. I'll tell you the one right now, which is just terrifying to me because I recently misplaced my passport. And like you said, we have shows coming up and next month in Manila and then Tokyo and Japan and other places. And so, it's other than getting a new passport, each of those places has such a unique appreciation of classical music, of film scores, of the concert experience. They're all. I mean, I have so many stories to either win Jeopardy or win a bar fight. I don't know. I've got just an endless amount of silly stories, both positive and negative. I think one that I'll tell you one. There's one, I was in Mexico doing a show, and it was before the pandemic. And I get asked to do a lot of pop concerts and, do something Hollywood, and I get the idea. Um, and I said, okay, well, here are the options. And do you happen to have a screen? Oh, yes, we have a screen. Fantastic. Oh, then we could do something live to picture. I think I had a clip from One Week by Buster Keaton. And I said, okay, we can do that. So I communicate with the orchestra, send our contract, etc. Great, we'll do this 10-minute clip. And I contact about a month ahead of time, just confirming everything's good to go. Yeah, good to go. About a week ahead of time, just confirming last thing's good. What screen? What are you talking about? I was
Oh
like,
no.
emails. I said, so no, 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 no. Long story, slightly shorter. They had a screen, but they didn't have the technology required to show two different films. One is the master one that the audience will see, and the one is my print right in front of me. And I will see these vertical lines go from left to right called punches and streamers, giving me a visual indication of when something's about to land. So I didn't want this big screen to just sit there and to take the piece off. It was kind of fun. It's a very fun clip from Buster Keaton. And I just said, let's do it. Let's show the audience what I would see, and let's make a little bit of a game out of this. So the narrative kind of changed to just putting on a typical audience consumption experience to imagine it's 1938. You're in a famous studio in Hollywood, and in the back there was this really large screen because it has to be big. And I ham it up out of necessity at this point. And I said, and I encourage you, when you see that line coming here, go ahead and tap your foot and see if the music lands there. Completely just putting myself out there just for failure. And to my tremendous surprise, they really enjoyed it. Somehow the laughs were bigger, the suspense was a little more tenseful. It was a one of many odd experiences that I think the audience enjoyed just a little bit more.
Definitely made it more interactive for them, even though it wasn't even supposed to happen that way. And good bit of improv there on your part.
But we
Definitely. Now, on another topic I'd like to definitely ask you about is the LAFCI, the Los Angeles Film Conducting Intensive. And it's a conducting workshop that you run together with David Newman. And that seems to be where you really tie in your professional conducting life with your education experience. So, can you tell me about the idea for LAFCI and what inspired you to create it?
Oh, you do your homework really well. Good job. So LSCI, or it gets called LAFCI a lot. We do a lot of events outside the
Okay.
US, and they put it into a word apparently. Yeah, it was created by the wonderful composer conductor David Newman, famous for his Oscar nomination for Anastasia, I think in '97, for Hoffa, for Ice Age, all these great things. And Dave and I both come from more traditional orchestral backgrounds. I'm from the Midwest. I never had any intention ever to come to Hollywood to do anything like this. It would never appeal to me. And all by accident, I came out here and I was asked to do a conducting workshop with a group of film composers. And I told the organizer, that's really nice of you, but no one has any reason to listen to me. I can't speak their language. And so I asked Dave if he'd join, and he said, sure. And we tried to give some ideas of how to hold batons, some basic ideas of technique and communication, and the point of it is. And in the end, people got to conduct Star Wars with a CD of the London Symphony Orchestra, and everyone sounded fantastic because it's a CD of the London Symphony Orchestra. And everyone's like, wow, I'm so good. And we're both sitting there like, I think we've done kind of a teaching disservice here. And so we said, oh, we'll never do that again. 6 months later, they asked to do it again. We did another one, and we kept saying, oh, someone should really do something. Kind of like in our previous, orchestra classical training, we do workshops, and someone should create something. Someone should, and we decided let's try it. And we said, okay, let's try it one time because the fear was if we agreed to do more than one, then maybe we wouldn't do everything we could to ensure the first one went as best as possible. So, all right, let's agree to do one. And uh, people applied from all over the world. People that took that program that first year, like Tom Howe, who's uh, does there's the soccer thing with Jason Sudeikis, I think it was called. Um, uh, there's Ludwig Göransson, who does all the stuff with Ryan Coogler and Black Panther and Oppenheimer. All these incredible people took this program, and every year we've done it again and again. And Dave's schedule hasn't allowed him to continue with it, but we have wonderful William Ross, Conrad Pope. They're kind of most famous for their work with John Williams, and all these incredible people who really believe in this perhaps previous era of tremendous excellence. I think all of us have, I think, fallen in love with the magic of Hollywood, and these people practice it at the highest levels. And there's a whole new generation of people that maybe this isn't really addressed in most university programs. It's the idea that if you're going to get up there, you have the ability to make things better, which immediately equally acknowledges you have the ability to make things worse. At the very least, here are the tools to get the job done correctly, because you're not going to have much time to really explore while you have all these people on stage, all this money happening. You want to do the job as best as possible to, hopefully create the best experience possible for the audience. And so every year our program has evolved, and yeah, still grateful that this is actually 10 years of LAFCI, and we're still deciding to continue it. I think
Very
that's
nice. Congratulations on that.
thank you.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, it definitely brings up a really good point about the conducting side of things, is really how fast you have to be able to get a grasp on things. And sometimes you may not even necessarily have that much time with the music, just like film composers have a limited time and deadline to get their stuff in and get it done. It's like conductors stepping into that role as well, whether you're getting the soundtrack recorded or maybe a live performance. It does feel like the kind of thing that you don't have a ton of time to work with it. You kind of just have to jump in and get it done, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the idea is, certainly we have to produce, we have to create and provide whatever we've been hired to do so. But the really hard part is that because this is in the post-production side, so there's already some deadline that's not going to move with the release date, the whatever is coming out. And so our window usually gets smaller and smaller. But I think of it like, not to put myself in that category, but I think of it like any joke we've ever heard and have attempted to retell. And we use the exact same words and we repeat it. And for some reason, it's not quite as effective. I've certainly experienced that. But what's the problem? I said the exact same thing. And it takes someone's ability to take whatever they're trying to speak and to convey and to read the room and what the resources they have or do not have, and to try to shape it in the right way so that they are best amplifying whatever's in front of them, 5 musicians, 100, whatever it is. And the easiest thing to do is just to say the words, record it, next take, say it a little slower, record it, a little faster, record it, and you hope that one of those is the right one. But there's that human element that we react with between the music and the picture, and knowing when to push, when to pull, and how to read the room like that. And I think that's why hopefully conductors have value still. Otherwise, there's no need for us. And I tell my students that all the time. If you don't know what it is that you want to say, which means that you have to prepare, you have to think of some reason to speak, then it's okay not to speak. It's okay just to listen. It's okay to let them, musicians, do their job. And hopefully that kind of marriage can really amplify the emotion that is attempted to be displayed.
Definitely. And I think it just really keeps the human element in music and live music, in post-production music, which, can nowadays pretty much more and more electronic elements are getting put into post-production and, editing and things that are a little bit different than they used to be. But having the conductor there, having the orchestra there really just keeps that human connection, and really the energy of the room is what's determining what you're hearing at the end of the day.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Now, we have to throw in something for the Star Wars fans as well, because you've mentioned it a couple times. You also mentioned John Williams, and I know you've worked on The Mandalorian, Clone Wars, Rebels,
Yeah.
list goes on. So when did you first become connected with the Star Wars universe?
Um, Gosh, that's a wonderful composer named Kevin Kiner. I knew him when I'm from Indiana, and I was working on there's this little small city in the south of Indiana that has the regatta. And there's this little city called Madison. And there's a cute Jim Caviezel movie about it, very Americana sports movie. And I was hired by the school to arrange the music for their band. In order to do that, I had to contact the composer. shortly after that, maybe a few years later, we had this relationship of working together, and he got called by George Lucas to go to Skywalker Ranch and to essentially share his demo tape about what he was doing. And at that point in 2008, kind of following the original movies, the original six films, George Lucas decided to put Star Wars in a slightly different tone and go on the animated series. And that began the film The Clone Wars. And then began like however many seasons of the Clone Wars, and Rebels and the Bad Batch, etc. So started with Kevin Kiner. Fortunate to be able to do some work for Disney Library on The Mandalorian, to orchestrate, to conduct for it. It's incredibly intimidating, and I always feel really bad when people ask me about Star Wars things because I only a few years ago watched like the first film. And because when we would see things, we only get that clip when it's completed, and it's never in order. So I don't know what's going on. And I remember there's one, I think it was in Bad Batch, not Bad Batch, sorry, Rebels. And there's a moment where Vader comes out and Ahsoka, it looks like Vader dies, or it looks like Ahsoka dies. See, this is how bad I am. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm gonna make the music really happy, because I didn't have that film clip at that moment. It was the last second edition. And then I see the context later, and composers asking, like, can you make it a little more, a little less happy? Like, why? It's like, here's the ending of the season. This is gonna be fine. And I realized, oh, I see, that's bad. Sorry. I need to do my homework. So yeah, I mean, that music is incredible for the work that Kevin Kiner had done, of course, from John Williams and the other people who worked in the Star Wars canon. It's still ridiculous to think I've had any part to do with any of that.
Yeah, but what you said, I feel like is a really great learning point for people who, maybe don't know a lot about the post-production side of things or are getting into that world and learning about that world is how out of order and confusing it can actually be to be in the post-production world. Sometimes you're not seeing the film start to finish. You're kind of putting bits and pieces together and may
I'm
never
a
see what it
mechanic.
looks like at the end.
As a mechanic, I get hired to solve problems. My wife's the composer. I'm in her studio right now. She gets to do all the fun, great, artistic things, and I just think, don't do that, 'cause I have to fix that. And so, from a mechanic's perspective, I don't get to later on see the whole thing. And I was like, I had no idea. Oh, that's cool. I had no idea. Sorry.
No, that's fine. But like I said, I feel like that's something a lot of people don't necessarily realize when they're looking at the final project. I think, they might assume the kind of linear way that they see it versus all the back end stuff is totally not that way at all. No, but I'd also like to ask more on your background as an educator. I mean, at what point in your career did you realize that you wanted to teach alongside your professional work, or was it something you had always planned on when you were getting into the music world?
Um, I had never, well, I think all of us, we want to work, of course. We want to pay our bills, all those
Of
things.
course.
So many of us do teaching out of necessity. Um, I wish I could tell you some cliche thing like teaching found me. I didn't find teaching. And maybe part of it's true, but I I reluctantly enjoy it. I think of myself as not a very good student growing up. My ego was way too big. I hope it's less now. And I wasn't really that hungry to learn. I just wanted to be right. And thanks to some wonderful teachers, um, I fell in love with music all over again out of sincere curiosity, out of a willingness to want to share it with people, to explore it. I didn't want to talk. I wanted to listen. I wanted to digest it. And when I then attempt to share with others, I realize that not everyone has that same perspective. And so I jump in as a teacher and say, okay, but you can do this. Someone was nice enough to do it to me. And many of these composers who I'm so lucky to work with, they're in a position where they are trying to communicate their idea, their wonderful score to an audience. And there's something that I see as a teacher that they can hopefully polish a little bit more to really make themselves more effective, to maybe sometimes just get out of the way, let the musicians do their job. Um, I have really enjoyed that process. I never know what's going to happen when I have a student, because sometimes I have some really wonderful students and I think there's nothing I can tell them. And then they look at you and like, Maestro, what do you think? I was like, I don't know. Let's try it again. And then the others will say, okay. And it's the exact opposite. I did such a great job. And I'm thinking, oh no, you have no idea. Okay. Um, I'd like to. I remember many years ago, I grew up as a drummer and I had a really hard time learning some particular thing. And I think it was my mom or someone who told me, if you can explain what you're doing to someone else who doesn't know, then more than likely you're going to increase your own ability of understanding it. And so teaching has very selfishly, I think, made me a better musician, a better conductor. Um, I do enjoy it. It's it is something I've learned a lot from. I've taught middle school, high school, college, and probably having taught middle school, it reminds me a lot of when I was first working on Family Guy many years ago, and being able to go up there in a middle school, if you can't control your classroom behavior, you've got nothing. It doesn't matter what you want to teach, you've got nothing. And I remember there's a on this particular day, I was just a guest at the time, and the musicians were cracking jokes. They're really funny, and then the light goes on, and then with about 3 seconds before the music starts, everyone gets quiet, they focus, and it sounds amazing. It sounds incredible. Now it's their job to kind of focus and settle in, but it didn't matter. The contractor was clapping his hands, saying, "Fellas, come on, let's focus. Quiet down, quiet down." They're just ignoring it. And I see so many endless parallels between teaching and the professional world. It seems very much the same to me.
Definitely. And I think it all just comes back to the human element again, the human element of music, because you're learning from them, they're learning from you. It's the energy in the room, it's what you're working on, it's what you're focusing and collaborating on together. Even if it's something you already know, you may see it from a different perspective, or they might mention something you never thought of before. And I feel like that's always the case with teaching. And as long as you can have a good rapport with students like that, that you
Absolutely. My
definitely
biggest
learn more.
education happened in the studios. That's my biggest education right there. Being able to be with these other composers who are so extremely generous to let me come in and observe or whatever it was. I had a whole different idea of how I thought music worked. And to see how it is crafted here and at an absolutely ridiculous speed, it can either be empowering or paralyzing, as I tell my students. And I find it to be empowering.
Very nice. Well, I think you also empower a lot of other students out there as well, just in everything that you do. You have a great example of something to aspire to as a career with anyone going into conducting or any kind of post-production, any kind of involvement in the entertainment world. And it's been wonderful learning more about you and your career as well. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for
And
having
I'd also like to wrap things up just by asking you to give us an outlook on what's on the horizon for you. We know you have Silent Films Live 4 right now, but beyond that, what are the plans?
my 10 a.m. appointment in Ventura with the passport office. Make sure I don't create any further problems. Manila Symphony Orchestra, June 28th, the Toyama Contemporary Music Festival in Toyama, Japan. I think July 6th. And then we have an album we're doing over at Warner Brothers called the Hollywood Collection Part 2, which is the first week of August. And then later on this year is the start of the Singapore International Film Music Festival, which I'm happy to be the music director designate. So to bring some fun opportunities out to Singapore.
Very nice. Very busy year coming up for you already. It's all mapped out already. I love that. Great. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with me. This has been really enlightening and best of luck. Have lots of fun with the Silent Films Live this week and everything else you have coming up.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.